Okay, so when you work out, if your main aim is muscle hypertrophy, then you may have heard of the mind-muscle connection, which is often talked about by bodybuilders. But does that actually help with muscle hypertrophy? This paper looks at the evidence. So to quickly define what mind-muscle connection is, there are two types of focus you could have when lifting weights: as the internal focus and external focus. The internal focus is the mind-muscle connection, where you're basically focusing on squeezing the muscle as you're lifting, or the muscle that you want to be worked the most as you're lifting. And there's the external focus, which is actually focusing on simply lifting the weight itself. So before we get into hypertrophy, it should be noted that if your main objective is to increase your performance, over 90% of 50 publications have actually found that an external focus will increase your performance better than an internal focus. So basically, if you're doing a bench press, you don't want to be focusing on contracting the chest and the triceps. You want to be focusing on pushing that motherfucker up. All right, so moving on to hypertrophy. A number of studies have apparently found that when you're lifting a weight, if you're focusing on the muscle you want to work, the muscle that you want to work is actually activated more because you're focusing on it. Not only is it activated more, but there's actually evidence to show that it's activated earlier as well. And in case you're worried that secondary muscle groups won't be activated as much, there's actually evidence to indicate that the secondary muscles won't be activated any less, simply because you're trying to activate the primary movers more. So now the bit that we're obviously most interested in is, does this increased activation of the primary movers mean more muscle hypertrophy? Well, it's not definitively proven, but there is actually research to say that yes, it does. So the reason that they say that it remains unclear is because the study that they're talking about didn't look at external and internal focus. All it looked at was whether greater muscle activation causes greater hypertrophy. And they found that yes, greater muscle activation does cause greater hypertrophy. But it stands to reason that it doesn't matter why the muscle was activated more. Simply having more muscle activation would increase hypertrophy. So because internal focus is proven to increase muscle activation, and muscle activation is proven to increase hypertrophy, it stands to reason that internal focus does indeed cause greater hypertrophy. Okay, so moving on, it was actually found that how much weight you use will affect how much benefit you'll get when using an internal focus. For instance, when performing a bench press with the internal focus focusing on your pecs, if you used 50% of your 1 rep max, you could increase your pec activation by 22%. But if you used 80% of your 1 rep max, you could only increase your pec activation by 13%. So what this study is saying is you should obviously look at your goals and how an internal or external focus would help you. For instance, if you're simply trying to build muscle, internal focus. If you're just looking at performance, external focus. If, for instance, you want to build a strong upper body or a big upper body, but you also like running and sprinting and doing things that, you know, would require good performance with the lower body, then you may want to only internally focus when you're doing upper body exercises, but when you're doing things like squats, deadlifts, lunges, whatever, you could be using an external focus rather than an internal focus. And you would still grow a lot of muscle, just it wouldn't be optimal.